It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you, of course. Emil Amok to you. How are you? Got to warm up our cooling tongue music. Hey, are you devastated by the Facebook Armageddon that we're experiencing now? I mean, normally I do this show on Facebook, or it goes out on Facebook and a number of sites, sometimes on Twitter, sometimes wherever, right? I mean, we do this show live Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific. And if you've joined early, well, we just had to come on in our lanyap, our little something extra session, because my goodness, uh, if you think about it, this is the Facebook Armageddon. Everything has shut down, all the apps. And, if Facebook's down, that means Instagram is down. It means WhatsApp is down. Everything in the Facebook empire is down. It could be because of 60 Minutes. I blame my old friend Scott Pelley. Scott, it's your fault. It's that Hagen person, the person who's the whistleblower. Actually, it's not the whistleblower's fault either. We have to praise the whistleblower. We've been talking about the whistleblower who fed the Wall Street Journal the week's worth of stories that were just incredible, that talked about all these things like the two-tier justice system at Facebook, right? Where certain people, athletes, celebrities, were given more privileges. They were allowed to do certain things that other people weren't. It was a white list. Now, I know black lists, I know bad lists. This was a white list. Facebook. It's a Facebook cultural mentality. And that was in the works. We also know that the revelations about Instagram being dangerous, Facebook knew it. And all this new stuff we talked about last week, 60 Minutes did their report yesterday on Sunday. And now I first noticed that Facebook was down when I tried to send something on a distribution app, and it said, well, not working on Facebook, try again later. And then it persisted. And then I saw in the news, I mean, this is what's being reported in the New York Times. Facebook and all its apps go down simultaneously. The outage took out a vital communications platform used by more than 3 billion people and added heat to a company already under intense scrutiny. So, I mean, this is just incredible, right? That Facebook, just like that, goes down. It's like in one swoop, it decides that it's going to be like MySpace, like totally irrelevant, just out, just knocked out. It's going to be the cartoon character on its back with the stars on its eyes. Oculus, Facebook Messenger, all failing right now. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. So let's see. In order of some of the headlines, Facebook urges court to dismiss latest FTC antitrust suit. Yeah, good luck to that. Big tech is tumbling as stocks drop again. I mean, this is a reverberation because Facebook is now no longer the new kid, no longer the, oh, we don't know if we're going to ever profit. Remember that? Remember they said that at the beginning? Oh, wow, our stock price is good, but we don't even show a profit. I guess that was years ago. And now it's the mature social media giant, and it's in trouble because young people say, oh, Facebook. My dad's on Facebook. My grandfather's on Facebook, which is true. That's the problem. But why isn't that good enough? You see, all these ills are because Facebook can't live with the fact that you're aging. It constantly wants to get the new red sports car. That's a problem. So, according to, let's see, this is the This is the New York Times. Said its apps began displaying error messages around 11:40 a.m. Eastern time. Yeah, that's about the same time I got my error messages. That would be about 8:40, 9 o'clock Pacific time. Within 5 minutes, Facebook had disappeared from the internet. Hours later, the sites were still not functioning, according to Down Detector, which monitors web traffic and site activity. Technology outages are not uncommon. Facebook's last significant outage was in 2019 when a technical error affected its sites for 24 hours. You got to say, it couldn't happen to a nicer app. I mean, this is the strange thing about Facebook. It all is happening simultaneously as the scrutiny is turned up, as the whistleblower has come forward and is saying, hey, I don't want to take down Facebook. I want to make Facebook better. And all I know is that if you're a Facebook user, like I am, like I said, I hope that people can see this on the YouTube app or on YouTube, because we're out there, because we use another service. We're on YouTube, or hopefully they'll see it later when we distribute to people. I hope maybe they're seeing this on Twitter live. But can you imagine that, people like old people like me who have relied on Facebook finally realizing, okay, I can't beat them, join them, and now this happens. I really think that if you didn't think Facebook was in trouble before, well, now we know. And what do we think right now? Do we step up government regulation? Facebook says it wants some because clearly self-regulation isn't working. But when so many people rely on it, shouldn't there be some kind of assurance that their service is going to continue, is going to at least not crap out on us like this? There are businesses that are dependent on Facebook. There are, private enterprise, public enterprises, public communications. It was said that Facebook was this great democratizing tool. And this, I suppose, is the example that, there is a problem here in this free market approach. It can't just go without some kind of guidance or some kind of watchdog, because if you're an internet company reliant on Facebook, this is going to cost people millions upon millions of dollars. I didn't even want to fathom how much it's going to cost people who rely on this kind of. It's like if you were driving in a freeway, right? Because essentially what Facebook has done is it's replaced the internet, right? For some people, internet's still working, right? But Facebook, if you use this to be the internet with the, the rubber bumpers, the guardrails, if you're using this as your internet community, it's gone. So I don't know what's going to happen, but all I know is the whistleblower is going up there tomorrow before Congress, and she's saying she's going to sing her tune. Same thing she said to Scott Pelley on 60 Minutes. Same thing she's apparently told the Wall Street Journal, that Facebook is in trouble. Facebook is irresponsible. And Facebook is doing all it can for itself, to save itself, which means the algorithm has to be as nasty as it possibly can be. You can say, oh, well, why can't you just change the algorithm and make it better? No. They're going to make the algorithm because this is the thing that Donald Trump discovered. You polarize, you split up the atom, and you create this chaos, and you create a kind of, I mean, that's how you attract attention. That's how you create your unique, brand proposition. You split up the atom, everyone scrambles, and then they glom back onto you because you offer them some kind of solution or message or whatnot. It's the art of the provocateur. It's the art of the talk show host, right? Bring those phone lines. Polarize the audience. Build an audience. Everyone come to the platform. Give us your dollars. Follow the advertising. Buy the products. I mean, that's how it works. And Facebook can't make the algorithm kinder because it'll lose audience. I mean, it's already losing audience. It's trying to figure out, well, how are we going to deal with the old audience? Oh, why don't you just age with the audience? Why don't you just become an adult? Can Facebook become an adult? Does Facebook constantly need a facelift every quarter, in internet time? Can it just age great? I guess it can't. It can't age gracefully. Now, I don't know what the answer is to Facebook. Backup. That's what you need. Backup. They always tell you that in tech. Oh, you need backup. Yeah, instead of Facebook, I'm putting this out on YouTube. And I hope the people that I communicate with on Facebook will put two and two together and say, oh, yeah, Emil's on YouTube. Or I have to put down the fact on my amok.com that, oh, here, you can get on amok.com. Well, we'll see what happens when the hearings start up tomorrow. This, the woman, Hagen, first name eludes me. She takes a stand apparently in a few hours, and we'll see. We'll see what kind of Frances Hagen, former product manager, against election interference on Facebook. I've always wondered, she says that Facebook isn't perfect. I've often wondered how Facebook does its things, because when they ask me to do things, I just don't know. I don't know who reads it and who gets back to me, and the community. How do you set up a customer service department when your customer base is 3 billion people all over the world? I mean, I think at that point you realize I'm too big a company. I can't afford to make this much money because I can't service the profits that come out of servicing this many people. I mean, that should be logical, but there is this thing called greed. And I think that's what's happening. So I hope that people find us on YouTube or find us on our amok.com site. I did post a new column today. I wrote in the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. I just talk about history. Talk about when history makes the news. History is supposed to be like, we like to forget history. We like to forget that mankind lived through something as heinous as the Filipino-American War. No one talks about the Filipino-American War, but they talk about the Spanish-American War. Oh, we won that just in a couple of days. Yeah, Dewey, Manila Bay. They forget that the Filipinos rose up, fought the U.S., and engaged in a guerrilla war called the Philippine-American War that lasted from 1898, the end of the Spanish-American War, to at least 1912, with skirmishes throughout the country, and cost 1 million Filipino lives. We never think about that. We don't think about that kind of history. We prefer history to be history, buried in the past, because let's face it, it's hurtful, bad stuff. And society is all too willing to let it stay buried. The deeper, the better. That is until someone decides it's just too immoral to just ignore it all. And then history comes alive and it makes news. And we saw that last week when the city of San Jose said, Chinese Americans, we're sorry. We're sorry to the things that we subjected you to, the acts of fundamental injustice, terror, cruelty, and brutality. We're sorry for all that. Goes back to 1866, the first Chinatown in San Jose. And then they keep having to move. There were 5 Chinatowns in San Jose history because of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. All the racism prior to that kept the Chinese on the move. And finally, last week, San Jose apologized. A teachable moment, yeah. Only took 155 years. And, it happened last week also, just to put things in perspective. The same week that Robert Aaron Long, the so-called Atlanta spa shooter, right, charged with killing 8 people, 6 of whom were Asian American women, he already has 4 life sentences on the first 4 murders that he was accused of and convicted of in a county north of Atlanta, Cherokee County. But last week, he appeared in Atlanta, Fulton County, where the DA is seeking hate crime charges. And to the 4 Korean American women in Atlanta, Robert Aaron Long pleads not guilty. What? So the first 4, yeah, responsible. The second 4, he was just crazed and insane. His next court appearance is on November 30th. I just think we need justice for the families. And let's see how this plays out. He says he's not guilty. Let's see his case. Does he have a case? And can you go from sane to insane in a matter of hours? I guess after you kill your first 4, are you off the deep end? And then all those subsequent killings, those 4 Korean American women, oh yeah, insane for those. Then again, look, he's got 4 consecutive life sentences with like another 35 years added to that. Will another 4 life sentences matter? I don't think we're ready to think about forgiveness yet. It takes time for that. But it's funny how that instance is juxtaposed with the Chinatown apology from San Jose, because it's clear this historical context. Xenophobic hate toward Asians runs deep in America. So this is Filipino American History Month. First weekend I spent with some Filipinos. Surprise, surprise, huh? And they were saying, Emil, we're celebrating 50 years of the birth of Filipino Americanism. Filipino Americanism. They said it dates back to the Far West Conference, or the Far West Convention of Filipino Young People, that took place in August 1971. in Seattle, Washington. And, I'm thinking 1971, I was just a kid. This is in high school. I had long hair. I was a football player. And I wouldn't cut my hair. So I was an activist already. But I was a hair activist, not a Filipino activist quite yet. I mean, I knew I was Filipino, but I didn't know that there was a thing for us to stand up. I knew there was racism, but 1971, 6 years after civil rights, you knew there was a kind of a loose connection that we had with blacks. That stuff done towards blacks. It was like stuff done towards us, acts of discrimination, and that we would be part of whatever kind of recompense, any kind of action to sort of say, hey, look, that's wrong. Those transgressions are wrong. We're going to right them. We were sort of part of that, right? Well, apparently not. And we were still kind of a binary black-white world, and Latinx, Asian Americans weren't really included. And that's why amongst slightly older among the young generation of Filipino Americans, 1971, college age, didn't really quite go down to high school where I was. But people went to this convention and they saw themselves as aggrieved Filipino Americans who are ready to stand up for themselves, for their rights. So I'm in the process of writing a column on that. And I'll talk about that more on subsequent days this week. I mean, this is Filipino American History Month, right? So we have a lot of time to talk about those stories. And I have some views on Filipino Americanism, they call it. Because I really feel that I have only begun to sense what being a Filipino American was just within the last 10 years. There's been a strong sense of it. I mean, look, we're a small minority, so minorities have to come together in coalition, which means, black, indigenous, people of color, the BIPOC thing, it's a real thing. Filipinos, 4 or 5 million, we can't do it on our own. But in coalition with other groups, yeah. And I guess when I was younger, I didn't really feel like we were part of any group. Asian, well, sort of, but for so many years, Asian meant Chinese. Asian meant Japanese, Korean. Did it mean Filipino too? Well, yeah, except it didn't always feel that way. So I will talk about some of the discussion that came out of this Far West Convention memory that people had. And look, a lot of people were there in the 70s, 71, are now 80 and 90. The youngest, I didn't go, but the youngest might have been, 68, 70. And they talk about something really exciting that made them feel not like Filipinos in America, but as Filipino American. And I will talk about that in subsequent shows this week. Actually, we have a whole month because October 1st, right? First day, Filipino American History Month. Joe Biden issued a proclamation to Filipino Americans, which, everyone was happy, but wouldn't you know it, there's always something that gets in the way of our glee, our gleefulness, because the big story over the weekend was really a Filipino story. How President Rodrigo Duterte decided to resign from the presidency in the Philippines. Oh, wait a minute, Emil. I thought you were talking about Filipino Americans. Well, here's the thing. And this has been an issue that has dogged Filipino Americans from day one. We have one foot here in America, and because of relatives, family, friends, we have one leg straddling the Pacific in the Philippines. I think that's true with most Asian Americans. They look back at the ancestral home and there's a connection. Chinese, Korean, Japanese, especially true with Filipinos. But the news that Duterte was going to retire and not run for either vice president or president was a real switch, because that was the fear. Duterte would try to avoid prosecution by the International Court in The Hague over his extracurricular or his not extracurricular, but extrajudicial drug killings that is intended to control the spread of drugs in the Philippines. He's already been taken to task for human rights violations by the court, and only by running for office could he be kept from being prosecuted. But because the Philippine Constitution forbids him to run for another term as president, he considered running as vice president. So he decided, no, he's not going to do that. He's going to retire. Doesn't mean he's going to face the music, and doesn't mean that he's not going to make another family member. I understand his daughter is interested in running for president. Now, how does this square with his party that has already sort of embraced the idea that Manny Pacquiao should be president of the Philippines? Manny Pacquiao, the boxer. As I've said before, I don't think Manny Pacquiao deserves to be president of anything. You can't be president of anything if you are an outright declared bigot. You can't be a serious candidate for president of any democratic nation if you have confessed to this idea that you had suicidal ideation, as he did the other week. He was talking about maybe he's trying to gain sympathy. I'm sorry I was homophobe. I was having these issues. I'm telling you, guy's a boxer. He should stay a boxer. He should take me up on my offer of me fighting Manny Pacquiao. That would be a good end for him and possibly for me. As I said, I've taken online boxing classes. I can handle Manny. I'll hide behind my gong. So, yeah, the Philippines, that story of Duterte pretty much eclipsed anything Filipino American. And I dare say there must be Filipinos in America who are talking about, oh, Duterte's not running. And Duterte's a popular guy. He's kind of like both Duterte and Pacquiao actually have streaks of Trumpiness in them that make them kind of populist and make them appealing to a certain part of the electorate that could elect them president of the Philippines. It did elect Duterte, and he leaves somewhat popular, maybe waning a bit because COVID. His reaction to the COVID crisis has not been great. His siding with China, which really would rather see the Philippines obliterated, doesn't make sense, but he bought Chinese vaccine instead of waiting for the West, although the West, the United States especially, did provide some vaccine. But there's a lot to sort out before we get to the Philippine elections. And keep in mind, there's a lot of Filipinos here who are dual citizens. So that issue came up amongst the Filipinos. They said, back in 71, there was a faction that wanted to talk about martial law. And some people said, look, we're Filipino American. We don't talk about the Philippines. But you know what? We can't separate it. It's our families. It's, we have relatives there. We can't separate the politics of the Philippines from the politics here. And I'll say this. I think when Marcos, the dictator, was the president of the Philippines, it really put a focus on the Philippines like at no other time in history. And even when Cory Aquino and People Power won out in 87, 88, the Philippines lost a little luster. The good feeling of People Power did not last. And instead, there was a new kind of cronyism, a new kind of corruption that took hold. And it made people say, well, okay, that's the Philippines. It's their democracy. Let them do with it what they will. That's sort of like the arm's length kind of attitude we have now with Duterte. Although Trump and Duterte had a fairly good relationship. Autocrats like each other. I think it's a little different with Biden. But let's see. Let's see what happens with the Philippine elections. Let's see what happens with the Filipinos here in this country. Because, the connection to the Philippines is still strong since most of the people who make up the 4 to 5 million Filipinos in America immigrated here within the last 30, 40 years. Because I'm talking to you on Monday, the 4th, but on October 3rd, we celebrate the anniversary of the signing of the Immigration Act of 1965. And that's the Immigration Act that allowed 20,000 Filipinos to come every year into the United States after years of quotas, after years of people just not being able to come in, limitations, restrictions, racist. They were all lifted in 65 with the Immigration Act. And it wasn't just the Philippines. It was all of Asia. So you don't really see a Philippines or a sense of Philippine America emerge or a sense of Asian America really emerge until after 65. It's like, well, we had Asian Americans. We've had Chinese Americans in this country for for decades, right? That's why we have the Chinese Exclusion Act. They were Asian Americans born in this country, Asian descent. San Francisco's Chinatown. We had Asian Americans born because they came here during the gold rush, during the golden spike years, the building of the railroad. Asian Americans have been here a long time. But when the restrictions to immigration took place and weren't lifted from, say, generally speaking, 1924 to 1965, well, that was a damn stopper. And only since 65 have we seen this wave. So you have a lot of people here who aren't connected. We have the young part of the community not connected with the older part of the community. Typical generation gap. We're going to have to work that out. I don't know how we do that. How do we work that out? More talk? Just within ourselves? Or more working in coalition with others? So anyway, the 1965 Immigration Act. You cannot forget that that momentous historical event. That's in AAPI history and Filipino American history. October 3rd, 1965. That's when Johnson signed it into law. And you see how it all kind of dovetails the history with each other. So a little history lesson. We're going to talk about Filipino American history all throughout. I'll talk about the Far West Convention more so tomorrow. We talked about Duterte. If you're Asian American and live in California, or maybe you live in New York and have a soft spot in your heart for the Giants and the Dodgers, because you know the polo fields and the polo grounds in New York, or you know Ebbets Field in Brooklyn. Well, I think it's going to come down to the Giants and Dodgers. The Giants have won the National League West, the division. But the Dodgers are in the wild card. They play the Cardinals. The Dodgers are going to be the home team against Cardinals, and they look to be able to get through the one and done playoff game. And that would set up a matchup between the Dodgers and the Giants for domination of the West. And it would be fitting because those two teams finished 1-2, the Giants with 107 victories, the Dodgers with 106, all after the last day of the season. It was kind of exciting the last couple days. And I have to admit that I kind of teared up a bit. You know, the Giants have been important in my life. I followed them, of course, the first pennant years in 1962. And then when they won in 2010, I have to admit I was sort of a little standoffish during the Bond years, the Barry Bonds years. Great teams, but a little standoffish. Me. I didn't get excited about it until 2010 when they won, 2012 when they won, 2014, and then when the losing years began, 2015, 2016, I kind of lost my way in Giantsville. But now here they are. They're back. I think it's great. And this team is really better than all those other teams. It's hard to admit, but like up and down the lineup, the only thing I would say is the pitching's not great. Not as great. Logan Webb, great. Kevin Gausman, sometimes. But aside from that, they could go all the way. So I'm rooting for the Giants. And if you're an Asian American baseball fan in California, if you're from the South and love the Dodgers, from the North and love the Giants, if you're in Hawaii and love the Giants, kind of an exciting time. So if they play each other, it could come down to a series that begins on Friday. But the Dodgers have to beat the Cardinals. Hey, if the Cardinals beat the Dodgers, I'm fine with that. The Cardinals, I used to live in St. Louis, and I would like to see the Giants beat the Cardinals. But look, it's baseball. This is the best time to watch baseball. Every game is meaningful. It's exciting. I'm watching. More so than football. And I'm the guy who wouldn't cut his hair, right? All right, we covered everything. We covered the Giants, Duterte, Filipino American history, AAPI history, Facebook. Hey, go to my column on the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund site if you want to see the story I told at the Harvard Unity Conference, the conference of Asian American alumni groups. It's a good story. Read about it, read the history, and then click the link and see it there. Or you can see it later. I'll put it up on my amok.com site. All right, that's it. This was going to be a real short, easy thing, but I got carried away. I just got carried away. What can I say? I mean, Facebook has gone down. Facebook. Do we pray for Facebook? I don't, I got friends who just denounced Facebook. Yes, Facebook is evil, but so is the U.S. military industrial complex. I mean, how do you reconcile it all and still live a modern life? I don't know. But I think we're going to have to work that out. I think for sure when Facebook goes up before Congress, there'll be a lot more people savvy and who know what's going on, and they won't let Facebook get away with what they've gotten away with. I think after a while, even the older members of Congress begin to get it. All right, that's it for me. I'm Emil Guillermo. Thank you for listening to Emil Amok's Takeout 150. What does an Asian American think? WDAAAT. What that? We fill the void. Thank you for joining me. I like to say, hey, bang the gong. Bang the gong. You can, I guess, check out if Facebook at emilguillermo.media is working, but you can check me out on amok.com. Also, check me out. Yeah, check me out there. And also on the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund site, aldef.org. You can email me at Emil, EMIL, at amok.com. Emil Guillermo here. Hey, if you made it this far, thank you very much for joining us. I've got some story time things coming up in the next couple of weeks. Asian American, Filipino American story time sessions. And that's it. Thank you for being here. As I'm fond of saying, may you live in safety. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. I mean that. Till next time.